To edit our floating portraits, we're going to start by bringing in the layer that's the background, which is nobody in it, no chair, no person. Once we open that up in Photoshop, we're going to bring in the next picture right on top as an additional layer. So go ahead and bring in that photo of the person and the chairs or chair. Then you just hit enter. So our goal for this one is that we're going to be using the function within Photoshop where we auto-align the layers so it can line things up just perfect, and we'll be able to then layer mask away the person or the chairs that the people are on. So first you need to unlock the layer for the background. You can do that just by double clicking on the lockbox. Click OK. Next, this top layer, we need to right click and do what's called raster size the layer. After that's done, we've got both of them unlocked and not a smart object. It allows us to select both of them just by clicking on one, then hold shift and click on the next one, so they're both highlighted. Then we'll go up to the top edit menu and go down to auto align layers. You can keep it on auto and click OK. Photoshop is lining up things, so if the camera happened to move just a little bit, we weren't using tripods, so it might have moved just a little bit. Then what we'll want to do is use the crop tool to crop along these edges, because there's a little bit of image that we need to get rid of to make it so that we don't have blank space on the edges. So click on the crop tool, then bring in the image just a little bit so that way you don't have areas that are invisible on the edges of your frame. Hit enter on your keyboard. Now we're ready to begin getting rid of the chair. So to get rid of the chair, we're going to click on our top layer. We're going to create a layer mask, which is this rectangle with a circle in the middle of it. That adds this white layer mask box here. Then we're going to click over on the brush tool. Remember the shortcut on your keyboard for changing the brush size is the bracket keys on your keyboard. So between P and backslash you can do the bracket keys. Now if I paint black with a soft brush, I'm going to go 0% hardness at first, I can zoom in by doing Control plus, and I can begin to paint away the chair. Now once I get a little bit closer to myself here, and I'm just going to get rid of a bit more here because I want to make a realistic shadow afterwards. I can even do this, eyeball the layer that's behind, and then you can see how you're doing with getting rid of stuff. As you get closer and closer to the person, you're going to want to get a smaller and smaller brush. You can even do this. If we want to get a real exact slice, we can switch over to our quick selection tool and quick select to make a selection right along the edge of the person. If you select more than what you want, you hold the minus or the alt and then it minuses away. But I'm just trying to get right along the edge of my arm here. Okay. So then when I go back to my brush tool, I can create a nice exact cutout because it only affects the things that are right inside my selection. I'll have to work with this area a little bit. Maybe I'll use the clone tool to kind of get rid of some sections there, the chair that's within myself. Alright, so then I'm going to do Control D to deselect. That's a nice exact cutout there. Touch things up a little bit if I need to. But one thing you'll probably notice is that the exposure is a little bit off from one picture to the other. You see how it's a little bit brighter for the background image? Kind of hit the eyeball on and off on there for you so you can see that again. So what I can do is click that back layer, and then I can go up to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. and I can change the brightness back and forth until it looks exactly the same as the front image. Then click OK. I'm just going to use the clone tool a little bit on this area here to fix that up, and then I'll restart the video. Alright, so hitting that eyeball on and off on the back layer allows me to see how much I've gotten rid of. Okay, well, as it turns out, I've got enough space now I can make a realistic looking shadow underneath myself, so that way it looks like I'm really in this space. So, to do that, a real easy way to do it is to make a new layer above your bottom layer. So it's a blank layer. Then I'm going to be painting black with a really soft brush. And you can kind of match the general shape of what you're seeing. Alright, so I know that I get kind of a little bit further back there. Got kind of my arm coming out over this way. It actually would have a little bit of a shadow kind of up in this area here. But I can always get rid of parts of it that I don't like in the end. So I gotta do a little bit more work on this layer mask because my hands are right up there. Alright. Back on here, paint some black right along the edge. A little bit more on my head. Alright. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the opacity down on this, make it really faint, and I'm going to blur it even more using a filter. So I go up to filter in the top menu, blur, and then I go Gaussian blur, and I can really push how blurred the shadow gets that way. Now, this is a really soft light that I'm in right now, so I really don't need much of a shadow at all to start to make it look a little bit more realistic. Kind of something more along this range here would be plenty. And then I can go back in on my shadow and I can get rid of the areas of shadow that I don't really need in the end. So there's a couple ways to do it. Since we already know layer masks, we'll just do a layer mask again. So layer mask, painting with the brush tool, pure black. I can get rid of that shadow that I don't need in some of the other areas. So I've got a real soft brush here, and if I use a really big brush, I can just kind of paint just slightly in the areas that I don't need the shadow. Okay? Right like that is probably good. You'll have a little bit of a faint shadow right in there. It'll kind of teeter off. The further away you are from an object, the less shadow you'd have on that space. Alright, so that is doing the floating portrait and making it look pretty realistic with that shadow that's added in. Alright, that's it. That's how you finish it up. Save it as a JPEG and turn it in.